And just to sort of start things off, I'm joined by Max Greene. To give a little bit of a background on Max, he's an enthusiastic member of the SupportLogic team. He's passionate about helping customers leverage the power of AI and ML to transform support from reactive to proactive. In his role as Senior Customer Success Manager, he's dedicated to ensuring that customers maximize the value that they're getting from the products, achieving exceptional results. He's got some really cool previous experience at LivePerson. Max managed key accounts, focusing on delivering value, goal alignment, retention targets. He brings expertise in building strong client relationships. He's got a background as a competitive gymnast for 15 years, including NCAA competition. And that definitely instilled in him a deep sense of commitment and influences his work. My name is Ryan Radcliffe. I lead product marketing here at SupportLogic, and I have a passion for business analytics. That's where I started my career at Broadcom. I love identifying friction points in marketing and products, driving organizational change to overcome those challenges. A fun fact about me is that I've been a musician for over 20 years, and a fun fact about Max is that he's been a karaoke star for over 20 years. So to break the ice, Max, how do you feel about HBO borrowing your name?
Well, thank you, Ryan, for that extensive and detailed intro. And I don't know if I'd go ahead and say karaoke star, but definitely karaoke practitioner, for better or worse, of the folks who are stuck listening to me. But to your point about HBO Max, I didn't mind it so much until they stripped away the word HBO and left us with just Max, which they did recently. And for those of you who are avid HBO watchers, for Succession, among a number of other shows, I imagine you noticed that the deployment of the new Max app versus HBO app was pretty much a textbook example of poor release readiness. So had they had some customer success managers and support teams working closely together, maybe they would have avoided some of those challenges. But yeah, thanks, Ryan, for the call out.
I love that. I agree. I think before we dive in, let's take a poll. We're going to launch a poll real quick, and we'd love your vote. We'd love to kind of see where you fall as a member of our community, if whether you're in support, success, or ops. We're going to be kind of talking to all three groups today in this session. So we'd kind of love to hear how you fall into those buckets. SupportLogic is well known in the support space, but the story that we're really here to unpack today is how these high value support signals can actually strengthen customer success. And Max, I want to toss it to you and get your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So this is something near and dear to my heart, right? I've worked in customer success for the last going on about 8 years now. And for most of that time at the organizations that I worked with, we didn't communicate that much with support, except when there was an escalation, right? And what that meant is that we were often we weren't aligned with what was going on. We didn't know how our customers were feeling. Because one thing and we've heard this actually quite a bit in the last 2 days. I think it was talked about, John Ragsdale talked about it in the earlier session, which is that support is really the front line of engagement with your customers, right? Most of the conversations that your customers are having with you are going to be happening through support. And as a result, providing a great support experience, and as well as keeping customer success informed through collaboration and synergy, are super critical to ensuring that customer success can focus on driving outcomes for customers and not be stuck, having conversations with customers about break fix and escalations, right? If you maintain that alignment between the two, both functions can really achieve in a way that they haven't been able to as siloed organizations.
I love that point. It looks like we've got a good split across the room from support and success. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And let's get started. Let's align around that mission of customer success. Max, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we've got up here on the screen with this equation that really, when we went into Pulse, Gainsight Pulse a month ago, this was really the theme of the conference, is what builds customer success.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. And so the customer success mission, right? And we hear outcomes all the time. You could consider it a buzzword almost at times, right? But really, it's really critical for customers to be successful. That customer success is aligned with the customer right from the start of the relationship on the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And that's kind of arguably the most important function of customer success. But in order to do that, you need to be able to build relationships. The customer needs to perceive you as the trusted advisor, and you need to be able to be proactive on issues. And that's part of where that synergy between success and support come in together, right? And then finally, between success and support, you really need to bring the voice of the customer back to your product teams, right? And that's something that customer success can do, but it does even better when it's empowered by support teams and collaborating closely with them.
Tell me more about this connection. What I love about these two quotes is I think it builds an argument for how these two organizations really come together, and that's such a theme for the day. You're right. That's something Ragsdale was talking about earlier, and Marlene from Salesforce.
Yeah, I mean, customer success outcomes depend on delivering a good support experience, right? And why is that so clearly important? Is that customer success can't really focus on delivering outcomes if the customer's support experience isn't a positive one. If their issues aren't being driven to resolution quickly, then customer success very much becomes an escalation pathway, and it gets bogged down in conversations around technical issues as opposed to a focus around driving outcomes, right? And when you're perceived that way as a customer success manager, as a catch-all for technical issues, it becomes difficult for your executive sponsors and the leaders that you work with to perceive you as a trusted advisor, when all they perceive you as is an escalation contact. So that synergy between support experience and customer success, the support experience being proactive on issues and proactive on driving resolution and keeping success informed, enables you to build those relationships at a much higher level with your customers than you often are able to otherwise as a customer success manager.
That makes sense. I think it's a good time to bring up this quote from Kelly Capote, CCO from Gainsight. The most successful companies that we're working with are using AI to see those signals, bring them in from support into customer success, see that connection. And something that we're really here to talk about today is, what are we doing with our products and how are we bridging that gap with customer success? I'm really excited to show some of what's happening in SupportLogic and how those things are happening in Gainsight as well. I think it's really exciting, and I think it's a huge part of the playbook that we're going to outline. So let's dive in and start looking at some of that playbook. Max, I think it all starts with sentiment signals. I'd love to hear your take on how these work and how they benefit both teams.
Yeah, so you've heard throughout the conference a little bit the importance of understanding voice of the customer, right? And given that support is the front line of engagement with the customer, the majority of conversations are going to be happening with support. SupportLogic analyzes and reads all the written text across all of your support cases with the intention of surfacing that voice of the customer. We extract over 40 signals covering a variety of emotional states and procedural language and metadata that's incorporated into additional signals to help predict escalation, right? These signals cover a whole gamut of the way your customer is feeling in their engagement with support. It's really the voice of the customer at scale. So when we think in terms of these, think of your customers being potentially frustrated with you, your customers expressing negativity, constantly asking for updates. expressing confusion, which creates all kinds of opportunities for you to improve experience through enablement and a variety of other ways. So analyzing these signals and surfacing them creates a wealth of information that success, support, and the entire organization can use to drive improved outcomes for their customers. So it's really at the core of what we do is surfacing this voice.
I love that. One of my favorite parts about this sentiment signal stuff is how it's tracking. It's one thing to have your managers or your support folks, your success folks reading through tickets. They can, of course, humans can spot this sentiment too. We're the best at spotting this sentiment. But what this NLP is doing is it's reading the cases like you would. It's pulling those things out. And then it's also tracking these things. It's kind of keeping them clustered into bunches so that you can go back and refer to them again. It's almost like your swipe file for these different types of sentiment. I want to go back. I want to pull up every urgency case. I want to pull back every critical outage, and you can kind of easily go back and get those. What do you think about that tracking part?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And where the analysis of sentiment signals becomes really fun and really interesting is when you're looking at it over time. You're looking at it how it clusters around a variety of different factors associated with your cases, right? Which of your cases, which of your product lines are generating the most frustration or the most confusion, right? Which of your support teams, from different regions or even down to the individual agents are generating, the most of certain types of signal, negativity, right? The most updates being asked for by customers. When you start to look at these at scale and across time and see where you can find anomalies, it allows you to make strategic decisions about your support organization above and beyond just leveraging them at the tactical level to reprioritize resources and your SMEs in real time, right? So the beauty of this comes at two distinct levels: leveraging it tactically, but then leveraging it strategically on how you can improve your organization across the board, not just in support, not just in success, but also your products, also for the opportunity to how you engage prospects and existing customers looking for revenue growth opportunities. There's a huge number of use cases that many of our customers have actually been really successful in unlocking. So you can see that I'm pretty passionate about this particular part of this.
Oh, me too. I think one thing I look at, when I analyze competitors, a differentiator I'm always looking at is, yes, sentiment and leveraging AI is becoming a very popular thing in customer support, but it's got to be more than that tactical moment in a case. You've got to have the timeline. You've got to be able to look back on what's happening with your entire support queue. So oftentimes when I'm looking at tools, I'm saying, great, you've got that notification for me in the moment, but what about the rest of my team looking at this in a historical way? I think that's vital, those analytics. To move on to our next part of our playbook, let's talk about something that we call support health score, and what that is in not only in SupportLogic, but what that translates to with what we're starting to do with Gainsight.
Yeah, one of the critical things to note is that, and for those of you who use Gainsight or use other customer success platforms, right, generating a comprehensive health score is really one of the purposes of those platforms. So that you can forecast churn, forecast revenue, ensure that your customers are healthy, be prepared for conversations with your executive sponsors, for QBRs, all of these things, or for outcome reviews, whatever you want to call them, right? But it's super important to note that historically, getting the support component of that, understanding the health of the support experience of your customer hasn't been so straightforward, hasn't been so easy, right? And so leveraging the signals that SupportLogic is generating, we can get that into customer success platforms, and as well as just to help you understand not just that finger in the air, that finger in the air, understanding of how a customer is doing and how their health is, but with the empirical data for all the information in support, because support is one key pillar of customer health, right? It's not the entire picture, but given that it's the front line, if the support experience is healthy, then you're well on your way to making sure that the customer is healthy. And so that's really the intention of leveraging these support signals to generate a snapshot of how healthy your customer is from that perspective. And then as a customer success manager, you can focus on the other components of that, driving adoption, right? Making sure that you're documenting and setting goals and to help your customer achieve the outcomes that they're intending to. So there's a ton of value in leveraging those support signals and surfacing them for your CS team, so that they can be more effective in their engagement with customers. And think of it, actually, one additional thing, Ryan, let me point out, right, is those conversations when your executive leadership has to get on the phone with a customer, right? What they need to be able to know, and any CSMs here have probably received a Slack message or an email, like a ping from their leadership being like, we just got an escalation from this customer. I need to understand what's going on, right? So that I'm prepared for that phone call with them. But if we're getting those signals and making them available rapidly and easily and making them consumable in other platforms so that customer success is empowered, they can give that snapshot of information to the executive very quickly. And ideally, they can even get ahead of it so that call never needs to happen in the first place.
I love that. I love that we're going to dive into some of the details on that integration. I think one of my favorite things about Gainsight is how prescriptive it is. I think it's a huge part of its success is that CSMs can come in and they know exactly what they need to do in Gainsight. And what's funny about that, like you're saying, on the support side, previously you were getting reactive signals in Gainsight. You were getting maybe how many support cases you have, or maybe a metric like what your NPS score is, or things like that, things that are sort of happening after a case is completed. And so what's great about this integration is that now we're bringing in these proactive signals. So you combine these proactive signals with the prescriptive ability of Gainsight, and you're really arming the CSMs to be a part of more of this customer life cycle of, taking these elements that add either to the timeline or as a custom object, come into your Gainsight experience. And then you can create CTAs and alerts based off of those. So if you want to snooze your negative sentiment and only look back on it before that big, QBR or that big customer meeting, you can do that. And then if you want to look at every churn risk signal coming in from your support cases and add a real alert to it, you can do that. And I think that's what's great, is that you can take these proactive signals, bring them into Gainsight, and then decide how you want your CSMs to be prescriptive once things have landed in there.
Yeah.
Max, can you elaborate?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. There's this wealth of information that we can extract, and that as a CSM, you can potentially leverage. If I could ask, let me ask an impromptu question of the audience. For any customer success professionals here, like, how many of you love just reading through endless support cases, trying to find out what the problem is, what is going on, right? SupportLogic in this integration, like extracting these insights in real time and share and getting them into Gainsight, making them available to CS teams, right? Will focus your attention where needed on the cases that matter, as opposed to say, many of you have giant customers that may have often hundreds of cases open, right? Like we've seen that. I've seen that in the other organizations that I've worked at, right? And how do you spot and find the ones that are critical, the ones that need potentially collaboration between success and support? These signals and making them available in Gainsight and in the future other CS platforms inform the CS team and inform leadership from more than one side where they need to focus their efforts, where the problems are, where the smoke is, all of these things. So super excited to see, as we expand on the capabilities of this integration, to see how we can leverage this to make success and support and organizations more successful.
I think it's a key part of scale too. I was watching a panel yesterday of support leaders from various different organizations, and one organization really was able to still provide this handheld approach to support, and another organization was seeing 10,000 cases a month. And so it was so interesting to see what support looks like as an organization scales up, and how a completely different approach is needed to tools, to even things like a tiered model and a swarming model, and how I think the context behind all of that is, what is your case volume? What is support seeing on a daily basis? The view that we're showing up here inside of Gainsight shows you across multiple accounts and how that support health is looking across those accounts, divided by those signals that we were showing on the previous slide. Max,
yeah,
when you see something like this as a CSM, what stands out to you?
Well, you talked about this a little bit earlier, where like prior to this, to prior to the kind of AI and these types of technologies enabling this type of signal extraction that we are doing, often the indicators that were in the CS platform that we were working off of, that in Gainsight, just a list of tickets, a volume of tickets, right? But volume of tickets is not an indicator of customer health, right? It's not an indicator that a customer is at risk, and it is not necessarily an indicator that the customer is healthy, right? Sometimes like a certain degree of cases being opened means that your customer is engaging with you, right? And especially given that support is the front line, if there were no cases, that's potentially an indicator of risk, right? So how do you just understand rapidly how your customer is feeling? And the analysis by AI and ML extracting these specific signals really allows you to know at a glance in a way that you couldn't before, when you were just looking at ticket volume or having to read through them steadily and not necessarily even get to the information that you're looking for, right? And part of this also, you can see, for those of you who are familiar with Gainsight, right? Gainsight, when you're creating a customer health scorecard, you have those several pillars, right? And often those pillars will be, you might have one for adoption, you might have one for engagement, you might have, and adoption and engagement, adoption might be measured due to an integration with, say, something like Pendo or another technology, right? Engagement simply through an integration with your calendar, right? But support, the integration was just often a stack of cases, right? So now you're able to leverage this to understand at a glance with a lot more intelligence how the customer is feeling and get an overall picture of health in a way you couldn't before.
Oh, that makes sense. I think next I want to really pick your brain and see what you think about some of these insights that are possible in Gainsight. This is not something that SupportLogic brings in. This is something that Gainsight really does with any kind of data. And so when you weaponize it with something like support signals, you really get these dashboards and this ability to have anybody in your organization very quickly take a look at churn risk happening in support, or on the screen here, we have negative sentiment as dials across a weekly basis. So it's a neat way of looking at every account as kind of a snapshot. So if you're the kind of organization that says, whoa, we've got 10,000 cases a month, doing something like this would actually bring in a lot of noise into our Gainsight. We don't want to do that. Well, what you can do is you can bring something like this into Gainsight. You can snooze it from the timeline as a custom object. And then what you can do is you can have it so it's only viewable by something like this. So you kind of get that backup view, but you're getting a backup view of more proactive signals. So there's still a lot of benefit there.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. And to your point, right, this is native functionality for Gainsight, right? Being able to create these dashboards and create these charts and to view those trends over time, right? How is negative sentiment trending over time across your book of business as a CSM? which accounts are seeing spikes in negative sentiment on their cases, which accounts are giving the impression that they might be a churn risk in their conversations with support, right? As a CSM, once again, you don't want to be going into a ticketing, your company's ticketing platform, right? You want to be able to trust support to do their own role and engage with your customers. You want this information where you can consume it, and Gainsight makes it very easy to do so, right? And SupportLogic allows you to get it in there and consume it in different ways. You can consume it on the timeline and create calls to action with it if you want that type of immediate notification. But if you're also just looking at history, trends over time, Gainsight allows you to do that natively as well, just by leveraging the signals.
And as you mentioned with CTAs and alerts, that's a huge part of Gainsight. And one thing I like about this integration is that we're respecting the sensitivity of this part of Gainsight. I think as CS organizations build out how they want to use a tool like this, every organization approaches this part of Gainsight uniquely in what matters to them. What specific actions do they want to call for their CSMs? And so once you've got these things in the tool, then you can create this however you wish. Max, I'm not a user of Gainsight. Can you tell me more about how these CTAs work and what you like about them?
Yeah, I think the most important thing always to note is that Gainsight is intended as a platform of action for CSMs, right? The last thing we want to do is just generate noise. We were all, as a CSM, you need information at your fingertips that is actionable, but that can differ from organization to organization, right? And so what we're allowing you to do here is create calls to action based on signals where you see fit, where they're going to provide you and your customer success and support organization the most value. So we're not providing you a cookie cutter integration that can only be used in one way. There's tremendous power in the configuration that's possible to enable you to leverage these signals in the way that's best for your organization. We can make recommendations, at SupportLogic on how we think that you should use it. But one of the unique things about not just this integration, but also our products as a whole, is that our customers are always finding new and unique and interesting ways to use our products that we didn't even know about. And that's the power of AI and ML and the signals that we're extracting.
This is kind of our closing moment with this presentation. And I just want to circle back on that equation that we started off with outcomes plus experience equals CS. That's something that Nick Mehta highlighted in his keynote at Gainsight Pulse. And I think you would agree that, building that success foundation starts with these four pieces, and how important CS and success and support are together. Max, when you look at these four bullets, do you think there's something that we haven't covered?
I think the important thing to note when looking at this, we talk about outcomes for customer success, right? But really the mission of support is also to, for lack of a better word, support the achievement of those outcomes, right? Support is the front line of your engagement with customers. So both support and success need to be unified in driving that experience, driving those outcomes. And part of that is taking off those blinders, giving customer success the visibility that they need to with support, and building that collaborative culture, right? Part of that is the value that support provides. Support is a early warning system of blockers to adoption, right? Of product issues, right? The value of support is undeniable in that way, right? And finally, right, justifying the cost of service, sharing a common DNA. The cost of service, right? Support cannot be perceived as a cost center. Neither can customer success. Both of them need to be perceived as a revenue generator. And they do that by helping to drive outcomes, by ensuring that your customers are achieving their goals and getting the experience they need to. ensuring that the effort that the customer faces in trying to get their issues resolved is, reasonable and low, right? So the two things share a common DNA in that sense, since the end goal is to make your customers successful, to drive those outcomes, to encourage and to encourage renewal, and also to encourage and drive more revenue for your organization, because the outcomes are not just the customers, they're your own as well.
Max, I think that's a great closing point. I think with that, audience, thank you for joining us for SX Live. Max and I had a pleasurable time presenting this to you. We're going to put this up on demand if you'd like to revisit it. I encourage you to check out the other sessions and join us for the rest of today and for tomorrow as well as part of SX Live. Max, any closing thoughts?
No, thank you everyone for taking part in this wonderful conference so far. There's a ton of great content to come still, and we're excited to continue this journey with you. So thank you all.
All right. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye.